Canada, especially not with the Canadian accent French. I don't understand it at all because we learned like, from
C'est pas trop
Louisiana.
difficile. C'est pas trop difficile. Hello, I am Allan Ruhl from allanruhl.com, and I am joined today by Derya Little, who is a Turk, a Catholic Turk. Not many of those out there, and she is the author of this book, From Islam to Christ, where she chronicles her conversion story, um, being raised a Muslim, then becoming secular, and eventually becoming Catholic. And so Durya, just tell us, how did a Turk like you end up being a Catholic? Because there's not many Catholic Turks.
No, there aren't that many. If anything, the Ottoman Empire has been very successful of getting rid of all the Christians in Asia Minor. I yeah.
I was going to say not just the Ottoman Empire, but the secular Turks in the early 20th century were probably just as bad, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. I mean, that's part of that part of the history is very hard to understand for Westerners. So I kind of talk about it a little bit in my book because I think yeah, there's the book. That's mine. I wrote it with a very good editor. Thanks be to God. But so after the Ottoman rule, when at the end of the World War I, when the Turkish Republic was formed, our new founder, who was very secular, I read it out, he was a Muslim himself, he decided to create a new Turkish identity, and part of that you needed to be secular and Muslim, but not too Muslim, but not anything else either. It's like a really confused country now. It's kind of stuck in between East and the West. So that's where I grew up, and I didn't meet Christians till I was 19. So
Wow.
yeah, it was most like I was raised a Muslim, and my parents were both Muslims. My mom was a little more observant than my father, but they were both still very secular. My mother like never covered her hair, but they made sure that we learned how to read the Quran. I have a brother, so we both learned how to read the Quran. And but at the same time, we went to a secular public school during the winter and learned about like equality and women's rights and votes and all that crazy Western stuff. I know, right? So bad. So yeah, so it was kind of as growing up, I was also stuck between these two cultures of very Muslim society, and then like this imposed like indoctrination in schools towards a more secular approach, but nobody quite understood why that was better than this, if that makes sense.
It seems like, from what I understand of Turkey, it's okay to be a Muslim, it's okay to be a secularist or anything in between, but just don't believe in Jesus Christ. Don't do that. Hands off. Don't get
Right, and
baptized.
I think that, I mean, not I think, it's part of the history. So the Ottoman Empire fought against Christians for centuries, and so it's very nationalistic in the sense that like Turks are, as a race, Turks are better than everybody else. Like nobody liked the Arabs. Doesn't make sense. Even though our Arabs or Muslims, Turks look down upon Arabs. So there is that
Yeah.
like kind of a racist streak to it. But also the Christians are especially bad because first like they're polytheists, right? So that's just that's obviously so very bad. And Muhammad cursed the infidels so many times, and the Ottoman Sultan was the caliph for centuries. So it's like there's all that historical stuff, And there's the Crusades, which is like growing up, we were always told that it was all mean Christians trying to come and, take our lands away from us. Little did I know, but that's part of the indoctrination. But yeah, it's a little confusing. You're good as long as you're not a Christian.
Okay.
So.
And so it says in the book that in like the Turkish movies, that takes place back in the day, all the bad guys are like Templars and they got the crosses on it. And
yes.
There's actually a TV show on Netflix called Ruhl. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong. Have you heard of that show?
No, I haven't.
And literally in the first episode, who are the bad guys? It takes place in the 1200s. Who's the bad guys? The Crusaders with the... And then I thought of your book. I'm like, oh, yeah, there it is. There's the Turkish anti-Christian propaganda.
And it's like, so the good guy is like really ripped Turkish guy, whoever. So this is like the same story, just different people, different movies, but he's really ripped, he's really handsome, and he's fighting against these evil Christians. And they're just there to pillage your villages and, rape your women. It's just... they're just awful. If they're wearing a, tabard with a cross, you're just a bad guy. And all the Christian women are really loose. They just want to seduce all the Muslim men. And there's only one good, virtuous Christian woman, and she always converts to Islam and marries the good guy at the end of the movie. So, this is all part of that indoctrination, though.
So in Turkey, I think a few years back, they had a film about Sultan Mehmet II, the guy who conquered Constantinople. And then I saw the movie, and at the very end, he goes into the Hagia Sophia, and he talks to the Greek woman, and he's like, today is the day our two great cultures unite. It's like, screw off, that's not what happened.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, I mean, it was so bad. I tell people, look, if Christians stopped fighting amongst each other, we Turks would have never conquered Istanbul. It would have never happened. It's just, I don't know if there were more reinforcements come. Like when you actually read the history, you see that most of the Christian failing is because we keep fighting amongst us, and the Turks are there. So it's like we are just going to pick up the pieces once it's.
And just to touch on what you said, something that they don't point out a lot is that the Sultan, the Turkish Sultan, he had a lot of Christians in his army that were just there because they were getting a paycheck. And
we used a lot of mercenaries. I know they.
Yeah, like Serbians.
Yeah, he did.
There were Serbians in his army.
Right.
So you are grown up in this very anti-Christian culture. You, like a lot of Turks, you kind of lose your faith in Islam, and there seems to be no shortage of Turks who leave Islam. Like when I went to university, I knew a ton of Turkish people. Not one was religious. In fact, I knew one who had the same name as you, Derya.
Derya,
and apparently that name can be used for a guy or a girl, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah,
it's mostly girls, but yeah. It means sea, ocean, so it's kind of gender neutral, basically.
Oh, okay. And so, so there's no shortage of Muslims who leave Islam. But in terms of, becoming Christian, becoming Catholic, so explain how you went from being just a normal, average, secular Turk to one who was baptized Catholic now.
Okay, so it is a long story, and the long story is in the book, but I'll try to keep it short. But so what happened is my parents got a divorce when I was 11, and up until then I never questioned anything they taught me. But divorce creates that kind of, I want to say almost like a paradigm shift in a child's mind, because everything you've believed to be true is taken away from you, because, your family is the center of your world. And this happens in the West too. You see, like, if a Christian parent, like, divorced kids, I mean, kids of divorced children are really kind of spiritually a lot more fragile,
Yeah.
if they grew up in an intact family. So it's not just in Muslim lands, but the divorce is like a lot more rare in Islam. It's more common in Turkey now because of the Western influence. But when I grew up, it was very uncommon. And that's for the first time I started questioning Islam. And with Islam, it's really based on fear. So you're always raised with this like fear to always be afraid of God, Allah, and His wrath, and you can never doubt, you can never question. So it's like this is kind of is ingrained in you. So people never even come to the point of doubting, even when they're not religious, they're not Muslim, unless they're like militant atheists, which I've become like after a while. They're still kind of Muslims, right? It's like Irish Catholic. Like if you're Irish, you're Catholic. You may never go to mass, you may never go to confession, but that's how it is. But for me, I started questioning Islam because I questioned my parents' love for me and everything they taught.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's the first time I read the Quran in Turkish, because you only read it in Arabic to get the brownie points to make it to heaven. But in Turkish, it's like, it's imperfect because it's supposed to be only perfect in Arabic. And when I read the Quran in Turkish and started reading Muhammad's life in the Hadith, and I was just appalled, especially in two aspects, the way Muhammad treated women and the place of violence in Quran and in the Hadith.
Well, I like to point out in terms of Muhammad, this is something I like to point out. I know no one who's refuted this, but he has worse sexual morals than King Henry VIII. He makes Henry VIII
Yes.
look like a saint almost.
I know, yeah, exactly. Henry VIII, exactly, seems very virtuous and man of God compared to. I mean, it's so awful, but like, what happens is when you read about this man, learn about this man, is like the ideal man that you have to follow, somebody who's never ever committed a sin. He may have made like minor mistakes, but he's never committed a sin. I mean, it's just amazing how like that just becomes such a big part of you. So I rejected Islam once I started reading all these things about Muhammad, especially, and then I kind of fell into atheism. It just didn't. None of the religions I've ever read about made sense. But at the same time, I kind of believed what Islam taught about like Judaism and Christianity. So I was like, hey, they're similarly bad, right? Like they're all making the same crazy claims. So I didn't read about Christianity when I became an atheist mostly. I just I don't know why I didn't. So I moved on to atheism, became kind of like lived a very like secular kind of life. Not as bad as things are here. I mean, the worst thing we did. So I was an atheist by the time I was 13, I was like this committed atheist, and I was willing to change everybody's mind. And like the worst thing we did was to kind of get drunk. I mean, thanks be to God, I didn't grow up here. But so like we read Dostoevsky and Tolkien and like Plato, like we kind of were very geeky atheists who kind of felt very lonely and outcast. And so then I went to college, which was kind of my salvation. I wanted to get rid of the small town I grew up in, as most kids do, and I needed a job, and that's when I met this family, American family, and the lady needed somebody to teach her Turkish. That was like a perfect opportunity for me. Little did I know she was and still is a Protestant missionary who came to Turkey to preach the gospel.
Was she? I'm curious. Was she? Although she was Protestant, was she raised a Catholic?
No.
Okay,
she was raised an atheist. Yeah.
Okay, because she has a Catholic name, a very Catholic name.
Oh, I changed all the names because they
Okay.
are all, yeah, they're all missionaries in Turkey, and that's a big no.
Okay,
So all the
yes.
names, which is funny because they're also anti-Catholic, and I gave them some really Catholic names.
You did. That's why I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, because there's Catholics that convert to Protestantism, then go preach. I thought maybe this was,
right.
but okay, no, fair enough. You
Yeah.
changed their names for safety purposes.
Yeah, so like I changed everybody's name because they're all still serving, like some serve in Turkey, they're from Muslim lands. Like you don't want to mess with that, I don't want to out anybody.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, so she was raised in an atheist home, and she converted when she was in college, and so little did I know, and she and her husband had good jobs in New York City in the finance industry. And they kind of left everything behind and moved to Turkey. And she was very much like me. She was very kind of nerdy. She like reading books. So her and I, for 2.5 years, we met and we talked about nothing but God and anything about like anything and everything about Christianity. And I read the Bible from cover to cover twice while I was teaching her Turkish. So it was a wonderful time. But at the end of that time, it's not that I became a Christian really, but she made me realize that it's almost like Allah was too small like God. Um, because I was very into like science again, like math and science geek and all that stuff. And the God of Islam like isn't really compatible with science because you can't expect consistency from him. But like
Well,
you can,
you
yeah,
can't expect consistency with the Allah of the Quran from anything. I mean, if you take a look, it says, like, for example, I've studied the Quran in depth, it says in the Quran, contrary to what Muslims believe, it says in the Quran that the Torah and the Gospel are intact and we need, as Christians, to follow them. In Surah 568, it says that.
yeah.
But,
That's before he went crazy.
yeah.
Like like when you read it, if you were to read it like chronologically, which is it is not written in that way, the books. Like he was very Jewish and Christian friendly while he was still living in Mecca. And then when he moved to Medina and the Jews and Christians didn't follow him, he kind of became very hostile. So like those early verses are, yeah, they're very nice and peaceful and happy and.
Yeah, no, and he just, if I had to sum up Mohammed in one word, I would say he's confused. He was a confused guy. He thought he was a prophet, I'll concede that, but like
Mhm.
he just got confused with everything, and he didn't have the Bible, he couldn't read, so he just get oral tradition. And that's all it is, and it caught popular, it expanded out of Arabia. And so you're talking to the missionary. You read the Bible, and where'd you go from here?
So, I mean, reading the Bible, I mean, I like Jesus. Like, obviously you like Jesus unless you're a jerk, even non-Christians. Um, but like, the biggest contribution of her for me was made me realize was like God was consistent, pure, and good, which is this is completely different than Allah. Like so, and I realized this God she was talking about was compatible with this my own God who was like science and all that stuff. And I thought about it like if there's a God and there's an afterlife, this is really important, right? Like you can't brush it off. But I couldn't still kind of follow it because I thought if there's a God and if he's good, if he's benevolent, why is there so much evil in the world, right? Like I think a lot of people get stuck with it. And it's even harder coming from a Muslim background because there isn't a consistent understanding of what sin is in Islam.
Yeah.
Because a thing is a sin because Allah says so. It's not because it's bad for us or it's against our nature. Like he can change his mind tomorrow and then that thing is not a sin anymore, but whatever it is.
Well, it's kind of like like I know you've studied the Quran, like the consumption of alcohol in the Quran, it's undesirable. Now it's banned, it's stages.
Right.
And like I know that to a certain extent you have that in the Bible with a covenant, but that's like 1,000 years later under a new covenant. Like it's not like one day Muhammad says that God says this, a week later God says this. It's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the Bible, like some things have always been in sin. Like even with divorce, our Lord says like it's always been sinful, but we gave in because you guys wouldn't stop nagging and you kept doing what you wanted to do. Like for your own good, we gave in until like I came and fixed things up. So it's very it's very different. There's no like 10 commandments. There is no original sin, which is like a big confusion. If there's no original sin, like every person is born without sin, or without taint of sin, then and every child is sinless till they reach the age of reason. Again, this is all original sin aspect. Then you can save yourself. You don't need Christ. Like there's just a huge like a difference in understanding. After like so the way it's funny again, the Lord works in mysterious ways. So I had this English professor. He taught us advanced English, and he was American, a Fulbright scholar, and he was a Buddhist, and he was like very, very anti-Christian. And he gave us this passage. I have a whole chapter in the book, but he gave us this passage from Brothers Karamazov. Thanks for plugging in my book now.
It's a good book. Buy it, everyone. Buy it. It's a nice book. You can. Not too expensive. It's 200 pages. You can brush through it in an evening. It's great.
Yeah, I was told it's a page turner.
It is. Well, see, because the thing is, most people, like for example, in this book you talked about Joseph Fidel. I've got that book over there too. Most people think of Arabs, whereas you're Turkish. There's Arabic Catholics. But in terms of Turkish Catholics, they're very, very rare. So I think your book, it gives a good showing of what Turkish culture is. Like Turks, although they're Muslim, they don't really have a trouble drinking alcohol,
My brother was here, who is like a nominal Muslim. He doesn't pray. So I took him to a steakhouse here, like American steak. So he orders beer. So we both ordered beer. We're drinking beer. And he ordered steak, and I ordered ribs. And I'm like, they're pork ribs. So I was like, so how Muslim are you? I asked my brother. He's like, why? I'm like, I think you should try the ribs, but they're pork. He's like, more Muslim than that. And he takes a gulp from the beer. So less Muslim than this, but more Muslim than this. Like, they will never eat pork, but hey, drinking is all good.
Don't eat pork, but drinking that affects your state of mind is all good.
Yeah, exactly. So this professor of mine, he gave us this chapter from Brother Karamazov, and in this chapter, the older brother, so it's about these 4 brothers, is trying to convince the younger brother not to become a monk.
Yep.
So it's about Christ coming back, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but so Christ comes back, checking out, the earth. It's not the second coming, and he gathers up followers, and it's a great chapter. It's a standalone chapter. Like if you don't want to read the book, just find that chapter and read it. You can find it.
Is this the one where he goes back to Spain in the middle of the Inquisition?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Catholics are bad guys again. I mean.
Yeah.
So a cardinal from the Catholic Church arrests Christ and puts him in a dungeon, and he goes back and basically the whole chapter is about like this cardinal talking to Christ, how he messed things up, and how the Catholic Church has been trying to clean up Christ's mess. And he tells him you should have taken Satan's offer in the desert and given these people, which is us, security and earthly bread because that's all they desire. You wanted them to choose you by their own free will. You wanted to give them heavenly bread, but all they want is earthly bread, and that's what we are here for. And that was the first time I finally understood original sin. Um, and I think this is a lacking part in the Protestant theology as well, because the way they see baptism is different than the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So like I don't think that lady was able to explain it to me, like original sin, concupiscence, and all that stuff. But I think when I read this chapter, like by the grace of God and like a little bit of a revelation, probably, not by my own understanding, that's for sure, that I understood that the original sin has a devastating effect on the entire humanity, not just like me as a person, which is true, but in the entire humanity. So that's why there was evil in the world. It's not that God is evil, but like my choices make the world evil. Doesn't make, like your choices. It's like that Chesterton, like what's wrong with the world? I am,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, I think, that was the last intellectual part hurdle I had to kind of come across. And I had read about like Case for Christ and all those stuff about like historical Jesus, the reliability of Bible, like, and all that stuff has already happened when I was talking to this lady. And the next step for me was to, like, I didn't quite understand what it would mean to become Christian, like in my personal life. So it was all like an intellectual exercise for like 3 years. But like I didn't understand. And then I started teaching to these two little boys. One was 4 and the other one 7, I think. I don't remember. And when I taught them Turkish, again, another missionary family, I gave them very Catholic names. Yeah, it's funny. And so when I was teaching them, I witnessed what a Christian life looked like for the first time. I mean, because the other lady, I was just one-on-one with her most of the time. So the witness was completely different than seeing like what an intact, loving, caring family and marriage look like. So, and then I realized like, I want this. So like, I am intellectually convinced, but that's when it came down to my heart, and I still couldn't make the decision because I live in freaking Turkey, like you can't just become Christian. And once you become Christian, also, like, one of the reasons, I was in a very good school, in a very good university, and I would have a ton of jobs lined up, good government jobs, high positions and all that stuff. But once you become Christian, basically you can't get a security clearance because, like, we don't know, are you a CIA agent? Like, are you trading? Are you a traitor? Like, you become a traitor to your country as soon as you become Christian.
Wow. Yeah. I've got a question about that. When you converted, and you still lived in Turkey, were the Muslim Turks or the secular Turks more negative toward your conversion, or was it about the same?
I'd say Muslim Turks.
Okay.
But I was most of my friends were atheists like me. I have just a few Muslim friends who were like somewhat practicing, and they were kind of upset that I needed this spiritual void in my life, and I like kind of went with the Christians. Like, I was so desperate. Like, it was very hard to explain it to them. Whereas my like secular atheist friends were like, yeah, whatever, Like, they just weren't. I mean, the nature of the friendships changed, of course, because we used to sit around and drink and make fun of people who believed in God, and then I kind of show up like a few months later. Well, actually, like, it's just like, things changed, but they were like, okay, whatever makes you happy, it's fine, But I think the Muslims were definitely harder, as you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm curious. I got a question. What's your hometown?
Oh, that's okay. So it's Iconium,
Okay.
The city is Iconium, but I lived in like a small town near it. Near it, it's called Ereğli, which is like named after Heracles. So
Okay. So in Iconium, if you go to is there a Catholic church in Iconium?
I have no idea. It's very, very conservative and Muslim now. So I've never even looked for a Catholic church there. I really doubt there is one.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm just asking because I'm just wondering if you go to a Catholic church in Istanbul or or in Iconium or in the Far East, is it full of Turkish converts or is it going to be a bunch of Polish and Italian immigrants, foreign workers or whatever?
So Turkey is a very homogeneous country. So like you wouldn't find many foreigners in Iconium anyway, even though it's a very big city. So in more coastal cities like Tarsus, where St. Paul is from, or Mersin, which is very close to Tarsus, where my family lives, and you will see some Catholic churches. Most Catholic churches you can't just go in. Like you need to make an appointment. That you can't just walk in. There's only like one Catholic church that is open. That's like in Istanbul. But like they're so afraid, right? They kind
Yeah.
of keep everything under cover.
Well,
Uh,
in
yeah.
2010, like I think a Catholic bishop was killed in Turkey, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was, and it was his long time like driver. They say somebody paid him to kill him. The guy was apparently mentally unstable.
You
But
think?
then, while I was there, still when I was living in Turkey, like somebody killed a Catholic priest who was like praying before the altar. They came and shot him in the head. So it's not like you would actually. I never felt like physically. I never worried about my well-being physically, but there stuff happened. Like there were these three Protestants. They these people came and literally cut their throats because they were selling Christian books. Like stuff happens, but it's not as bad as other places, So
Well, yeah, it's not as bad as like China, but
right,
you
or
know,
in some other Muslim countries, I don't know,
yeah.
Indonesia and stuff. But it's still very, and there are a lot of like Eastern Rite Catholics too, and most of them don't have churches, so they usually come if there's a Latin Rite church. They usually go to mass there.
My entire family, my entire mom's family is Eastern Catholic because we're Ukrainian, whereas my dad's family's Protestant. So
Oh, okay,
yeah, so yeah, I'm very familiar. Like I kind of grew up going to both Roman and Byzantine,
right,
and yeah, so
yeah.
so like so there's not a lot of like I read an article online that how in some Turkish city there was a Latin mass community and they were all like Turkish converts and stuff like I, I'm just so like in the Catholic churches there, it's a mix between converts and
I mean, so I converted to Catholicism in Ankara, which is the capital city, 5 million people, so it's a sizable city, and there were two Catholic churches, and one was on the Vatican Embassy, on the grounds of the Vatican Embassy, which was the mass was in English, and the other one was on the French Embassy, like grounds, not right next to the embassy, but they have different places throughout the capital city, and that one mass was in Turkish, so that's where I went. And so I'd say, like, for mass, we had maybe 40 people, 40, 50 people um, every Sunday. And I'd say maybe the converts, there was like 8 of us.
oh, so not a lot
It,
then.
no. And I do, if you could find that article, I'd love to hear that because I hear in Smyrna, which is on the Aegean coast, that there's like a bigger community. But again, like everybody kind of keeps their head under, like, so it's kind of, unless you're in Turkey, you're actively living and meeting people in person, like everything is a little hush hush.
It's so heartbreaking hearing places like Smyrna and Ancyra and all the
Right.
and like Iconium, because like if you go
Right.
back to the Roman Empire, those were like all Christian cities, you know.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just finished reading the book of Revelation and I'm like, oh, this is all Turkey.
yeah.
You
It's
know,
like, oh,
like
I've
it's
been
it's
there.
all there.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, no, and like the first eight ecumenical councils were held in modern Turkey, like in Chalcedon, Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus, right? You know,
Yeah.
that used to be the heart of the faith. Now there's almost no Christianity there. Like you said, five converts in one of two Catholic churches in a large city in Turkey, right?
Right. Yes. And it's just so yeah, I mean, Istanbul is a bit better, but I just never met people because what happened is so I converted eventually through by the grace of God. Um, and then so I'm involved with a lot of Protestant missionaries, and one of the ministries I did was like we ran a Christian camp for Turkish teenagers behind the walls of Ephesus. So it was just beautiful place, and somebody I met there, like one of the counselors, we became good friends, and he was helping us, and he was in like a we called him a third culture kid, like missionary kid who grew up in Turkey, American, and he came to Notre Dame to get his degree, get his bachelor's. So as I'm reading about Protestantism, so like there are a few things that bother me, like sola scriptura,
Yeah,
sola fide,
yeah.
lack of a magisterium, and I'm like, clearly I don't understand stuff, right? Like I gotta read more and make sense more. I'm not getting it, so I kind of push those aside. And Anthony, I name him Anthony, my friend. So he finished Notre Dame, came back to Istanbul, and he was working for like he was a journalist, and I was getting my master's, and we met over for lunch for at a conference, and he told me that he became Catholic, and I was appalled. Like,
Whoa.
how could you? And weird thing, all the Protestants I was surrounded with were so anti-Catholic. Like this woman, Perez, like the first missionary I met, it was like, the Pope is the Antichrist, the Church is the whore of Babylon. Like the whole,
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
I've
she was
read
like,
Charles Spurgeon. I know about him. I just read one of his books. By the way, shout out to Corinth. You'll know what that means. But yeah, no, no, and no, that's so pretty much you become Catholic and then
right.
you move to England, right?
Right. So what happened is, so I chased this one French priest out. Like he wouldn't talk to me. He thought like I was trying to trap him to saying something so he would get kicked out of the country. So I convinced him that I was just crazy, not as a government agent, government spy. Um, so I had like an RCIA. So I was there for like a year, and right before I got confirmed, I got this scholarship to move to England. So I moved there and I went to another RCIA in England. So that's where I became Catholic. So I'm not really like immensely familiar with all the Catholic happenings in Turkey, because of
Oh,
that, because I was just kind of, we had like eight candidates within our group, and we just read through the Gospel of Matthew. It wasn't like this RCIA stuff that came up in the West. It was a lot more like kind of amicable. I feel like, yeah. So I was confirmed in England, and then I moved to here. So
so
that's
so you moved to England to go to school, right?
right for my PhD. I got it in England. Yeah.
What was your PhD in what? Sorry.
Yeah. It was in politics, not useful to raise children. But it was, I studied American foreign policy, nuclear weapons, and Iran, and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Fun. I think I need some vodka. No.
Yeah.
So, so I've got a few questions about Turkey. So if
Okay.
I go to a city like Ankara or Iconium, or Istanbul or somewhere like that. Um, and I talked to an average Turk. Have they read the Quran front to back?
No, who has the patience for that? First of all, like Quran. If you read, you said you've studied Quran. It's not an easy read. I mean, I read it
I read it
because
like 4 times. Like it's.
I read it maybe twice, maybe. I just can't take it. It's not an easy read, but Islam is one of those religions. It's just passed down to you from your elders and from your imam. Like they even say, like you, even if you read the Quran, you're not expected to understand it. Like nobody is expected to understand it, but they don't have a magisterium, so who do we trust? Like it's kind of really all messed up over there. So very few people would have read the Quran. Yeah.
Okay. Have you been able to convert any other Turks to Catholicism?
No, not that I know of. I kind of lost contact with a lot of people after, that's what happens when you kind of move to a different country. I'm just wondering if some of the teenagers that I was helping with, because I was much younger and much closer to their age, and so I'm hoping that I influenced eventually some of them, but no, not that. Yeah, it's a very hard soil. Turkey
Okay.
is.
Uh, uh, I'm curious. In the place you're living now, if you don't want to share it, that's okay. But uh, like in your current city, are there a lot of Turks there? Have you come across any?
No, I hear there's a Turkish community, but we kind of live in the middle of nowhere, in Northeast. Like we live in Pennsylvania, it's just in this small town. I see a lot, but it's kind of weird. It's one of those occasions, like once you convert, you are completely an outsider. Like they wouldn't trust me just because I'm a Christian. Um, so I think it's one of those occasions. It's kind of a prophet isn't respected in his or in her own country. Like it's very hard. It's almost they would be more receptive to an American Catholic rather than hearing it from me.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Okay. So growing up, did you do the fast for Ramadan?
Oh, I did. Yes, yes, I
Wow.
did.
Well, that's got to be that can't be easy. Uh,
No, I know. And we whine about the 3 times we fast there. I'm like, this is nice. You get to eat snacks. I'm like, this is not a fast. Yeah, and that's one of my things. Like, I try to write and talk about fasting because of that. Like, look, people, I did it when I was like 6, 7 years old, and I think as grown-up people who eat a lot, we can handle like not eating for a bit, and it's good for the Lord, and so yeah.
so you and I both know that in the Quran seems to think like it accuses the Christians of saying God is three, right? And it
Hmm.
seems to suggest that the Virgin Mary is part of the Trinity, right?
Right.
So I'm curious if I went to like, I mean, I'm sure you didn't ask this, so it's only a guess, but some random person who lives in Turkey, and they said, "What's the Christian Trinity?" You think they throw in the Virgin Mary because they haven't read? Uh,
Yeah, I think they will. That's what we were told at school because we had compulsory religious education courses, and we were taught that Christians believed in three gods and Father, Son, and the Mother.
uh,
Yeah. Imagine my surprise. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Yeah, because in um, the Quran says, at the end of the days, Allah is gonna ask Jesus, did you tell your people, take me and my mother as gods along with God the Father? And Jesus is gonna reply, of course, no, we didn't. They came up with that stuff. So it's in the Quran that they.
yeah, for those who don't know, that verse you just quoted, Surah 5:116, is part of a huge argument that starts in Surah 5:73, 75, ending in 116. That essentially, if you read it thinks Mary's part of the three that make up
Right.
God, according to
Yeah.
the Christians. Yeah,
And
when
I think part of it that because he was an uneducated man, and but he heard because he was a tradesman, he heard a lot of stories like when you read the Quran, you see that like Jesus making that bird that's in the he makes that clay bird and he
Yeah.
blows on it and skin. So you can tell that it's like a telephone game. Is that what you call it? Like you have a
Yeah.
line and somebody says at the beginning something and it comes out completely different at the end. That's what we call them in Turkey. It's like a telephone game. But it's like you can see the essence of the stories are there, but it's really like not right. Like it's not written by somebody who's read the Bible or and then kind of copied it. It's like written by someone who heard stories about Bible stories. Um, and I think Trinity was just too complicated for him to grasp. So he's like, I'm just gonna call them this is they believe in three gods and just call it a day.
Call it well, and I'm sure because he doesn't declare himself to be a prophet until he's 40, right? And think probably between his childhood and age 40, he probably saw there's a lot of iconography in that part of the world. And if you
Right.
go to the Greek church, you've got the icons of the Theotokos
Hmm.
holding the baby Jesus, right? So there's God the Father, oh there's the Son, and oh there's the Mother. It kind of
Hey, it makes sense,
makes
right? It's
sense.
it's on that, and it is confusing, and I understand it, and and it's hard to explain Trinity, like like half of the homilies we hear about Trinity now after like 2,000 years are like heretical, like not intentionally, but it's so hard to grasp it, and I can't even imagine how hard it was for him, and then
Well,
he
well,
just kind
well
of, uh,
apparently it's so hard that Allah couldn't even understand it in the Quran.
I know, hey,
So
telling you,
it's
oh God.
so. Uh, have you had any luck? I know I asked you about Turks. Have you had any luck converting some other Muslims or?
I had a lot of discussions with Muslims. Most of them are trying to convert me back, which is an interesting place, and they get very hostile after a while. So it's a very hard place for me. And if I talked to some women, which was a better place to start, um, like Muslim men don't like to be like bested by women, regardless of religion. So it's like there's some problem there. And a few others who were very close to conversion and they were just too scared. I'm sorry. So they were very scared about converting. So they kind of stepped back. I mean, I don't know. Like, if they don't write back to me, I don't. But I mean, honestly, internet has been my best tool to evangelize because like, they don't have to go out of their homes and talk to somebody and risk being seen because one of the guys actually he was very close to conversion, but he's like, I just can't go and talk to a priest. I would get kicked out of the home. My family will disown me. I would have nowhere to go. So no, I mean, there's like one Egyptian lady, bless her, she got baptized, but she was already on the way to conversion. I just kind of pushed her a little
Wow,
along, but
wow, that's
yeah,
gotta. Yeah, so it like yeah, no, because I mean it's got to be hard to convert in a Muslim country because I know you've read Joseph Hidel's book,
yeah,
like like if you come to the priest and say, "Oh, I want to convert," they can't convert him because if they convert him, it puts the whole community in danger, right?
right.
And
And it's like, and a lot of these priests are like, they are not even, they say like, I talked to somebody who was really attracted to the Catholic faith. He ended up becoming Protestant. He went to a priest in Smyrna and he said, "No, just be a good Muslim, you're good." This is what he told him. I mean, so this kind of stuff is so common. Like we have dropped the missionary ball, like I mean, thanks be to God for the Protestants. Like this is what I'm saying. They're just
yeah,
like
it's
I mean, and what happens is I think when you talk to a lot of Muslims and live in a country like Turkey, you realize that you can't convert anybody. Like, it's like all the converting is done by the Holy Spirit. Like I've heard more people converting because of dreams and visions that the Holy Spirit gives them than anything else. Because it's like a slap in the face almost. Like this lady in Egypt, I just keep telling the story because it's amazing. She was a really devout Muslim, but she started doubting whether Muhammad was a good man when she was reading the Quran. And she fasted all day during Ramadan, and she said, Allah, like, I really want to believe. I don't want to doubt. Give me a dream with Muhammad, whoever your true, like, prophet is. She goes to bed, and she has a dream with our Lord and Our Lady standing behind him. So I'm like, you're gonna have to convert after that. Like, you know, it's
So I take it, since the Virgin Mary was in that dream, she didn't become a Protestant?
no, and she would not become a Catholic, and no Catholic would talk to her.
All
Like, I
right.
mean, it was just crazy. It took forever to find a Catholic to talk to her because she lives in Egypt. I mean, like, I found, like, from a friend and friend and friend, like, it was just like, I live in America. I never been to Egypt. I don't speak Arabic, but like, through me, we found somebody who would be willing to talk to her. But that's how it is in Muslim countries, and Catholics are very much to blame for this. Like, it's an atrocity that the gospel isn't preached. You know, it's, hey, there are Protestants apparently, so we don't have to do anything else.
Uh, I'm curious. In your church you attend right now, are there any former Muslims apart from you?
No, no. Yeah, I am the weirdo. So, I mean, there's a lot of converts. I go to a Latin Mass parish. But yeah, I never met a Muslim. We would, yeah, no. I mean, a former Muslim, that is.
Okay. Yeah, I met a few former Muslims. I knew a guy from Albania. He became Eastern Orthodox. Um, there was a girl that used to go to my church. She was a former Muslim, but she came from a very secular family, so it's like very secular Muslim. And now she lives in our city, so I don't see her anymore. Um, but yeah, no, like, of course, online I've met them, but yeah, no, and it's a shame that Catholics aren't doing more to to do that. It's like, you come to a priest to convert. Oh, just go back to the mosque. That's good enough. It's
Yeah,
like, ugh. You know.
no, and it's so common, and it's just drives, yeah. It makes me mad, and I think part of it, when we say we all believe in the same God, like, what follows is like, hey, why convert then?
I
Why, you know?
Yeah, yeah. If we all convert, if we all believe in the same God, how come the Sultan turned the Hagia Sophia into a mosque? If it's the same thing,
Right,
Yeah,
yeah. Hey, it doesn't matter.
yeah. It doesn't matter.
Convert.
Whoa. Go to the
Yeah,
mass. Go to the prayer service.
right.
Um, have you got any other projects on the go right now?
So after From Islam to Christ, we just came out with Angelico Press. We have, did I send you a copy? I don't remember. The Beginner's Guide to the Latin Mass, because my husband and I, we started attending that um, a little over a year ago. We drive over an hour to go to this Latin Mass parish. It's crazy. And I have a book about the New Testament woman coming out in with I think sometime this year. I don't know. With Our Sunday Visitor. And weirdly enough, I'm writing a. I just finished the first draft of a fiction. A fictional grad student who is a Harvard. She studies in Harvard, and she becomes Muslim. So it's her journey to the caliphate and why she became Muslim. Like, she was like, she's an American and all that stuff. Because, like, my idea was to tell people that the only thing that could save the West is Christ, and the fullness of truth in the Catholic Church. Everything else is just going to send you to the arms of Islam eventually. Nothing can hold it back. So that's in the works. So there's always something going around in my head, but I'm hoping that will get published sometime in the next few years.
Wow, no. I'll definitely be interested in reading that. So we're just winding down. Is there one last thing you wanted to say to all the Muslims out there before we
Well,
wrap up?
I'd say don't be afraid of asking questions. And when those, and in the dark and in the night, when those questions pop in your heads, and follow them and see where they lead you. If there's truly a God, he wouldn't be offended with your curiosity. So follow the questions and see where they lead you.
Okay. And yeah, so everyone, go pick up a copy of her book. You could probably find it at a Catholic bookstore. If not, purchase it on Amazon. Purchase her other books as well. And yeah, so thanks for joining us here at allanruhl.com, Derya. And yeah, have a good evening.
And thank you for having me. Thank you, Allan.
All right, bye.